Now you can see that film tonight, Dispatches, Escape from ISIS at 10 p.m. on Channel 4. We're now joined by two men who have fought against extremism in different battlefields. Johnny Mercer is the newly elected MP for Plymouth Moor View. He fought with British forces in Afghanistan, and Mesa Gifford.
What it's like to be a YPG guerrilla. So here's Kendall on Nobat. Let's have a look at Dash.
Well, he's a former city trader. He went out to Syria to fight with Kurdish forces against IS last December and was deployed in the northeast as recently as last month after helping to liberate large swathes of territory from the Islamists. And we're joined from Birmingham by Shaista Gohir, chair of the Muslim Women's Network. But let me start with you, Mesa. You've been there, you've seen it. What is your sense, having seen this film, which probably has not told you anything you didn't know, what can be done?
I think it shows you exactly what kind of people we're up against, basically. It shows you what the Syrian people are going through, and hopefully it will spur more action from the British government to tackle this and actually do more.
What does action mean?
Well, action means more bombing strikes, not just talking about bombing strikes, actually giving clear indications on exactly where those strikes are going to take place and who they're going to be in support of. It means supporting the YPG, or the Kurdish forces, politically in the northeast, and generally having a more cohesive policy, basically.
Johnny Mercer, is any of that deliverable?
Yeah, I think it is. I was really encouraged by the debate last week we had in the House of Commons, and you're beginning to see a bit of cross-party sort of cooperation on this. I think, we've seen this threat's only going to get closer, and we've seen the terrible events in Tunisia. And we do need, and the Prime Minister is absolutely spot on. It's not about individual measures. It's about a sort of multifaceted approach, of which, part of it is deliberate military action.
But the problem is so complex in Syria. I mean, what do you do about Assad and the government?
Yeah, the problem is complex in Syria. I mean, with things like this, it's often best sometimes to look at what's worked in the past, and when did we come up against a level of violence like this? Certainly in 2006, 2007 in Iraq, we had the Sunni uprising, and people forget, 3,000 people were dying a month on the streets of Baghdad, and into that we did a sort of network hunting, 24/7 intelligence-led operation against the guys who are running these networks. But that is only one part of it. We have to work really hard to go against the extremism of young minds in this country, so that we're not just fighting this on one front.
Shaista Gohir, what do you make of what you've just seen in this film, and more particularly, what do you think can be done about it?
Very upsetting. I couldn't see the footage, I could hear it. It's very upsetting, very disturbing. I do think more needs to be done, and I agree. I think we need multiple approaches. I think one thing that I'm really worried about, and I've read reports online to say that ISIS have enough stockpile of weapons to carry on for another 2 years. That means they have another 2 years to build up further stockpiles of weapons. So the question I have is, where are the weapons coming from? Why can't the Western governments and other governments in the region stem that flow of weapons going into the region?
Can I just ask you, this really seems to expose the plight of women more than anything else. I mean, if this was being done on this scale to men, one wonders whether the reaction would still be the same.
I think regardless of whether it's being done to men or women, I think we do need to intervene. I think this is the worst refugee crisis we've had in decades. I think more needs to be done on the humanitarian front as well. So I definitely think more action needs to be done. But I do think in terms of policies and strategies, we do need to not just look at the bombing approach, because obviously civilians will get killed as well, but why can't we stop them from getting the weapons, and who is supplying them with the constant supply of weapons?
Let me go to Mesa, who's been there. I mean, who is arming ISIS? Could you tell?
Well, it's very difficult, because I have to say this, that the equipment that they did have was very good quality. In fact, Western and better than our own. So it was clearly supplied from somewhere. There is.
Well, it's pretty amazing that with British intelligence, American intelligence, all the rest of it, nobody knows where it's coming from. Is it coming from within the region?
Some of it has been shown to come from the Iraqi forces that have been overrun. Clearly, we've spent a long time training them up and giving them that equipment to defend their state as part of that operation.
So the picture emerges of a not very well-armed Kurdish resistance and a very well-armed ISIS. So is it down to arms?
Well, I think you're absolutely right. They captured an enormous amount of arms from the Iraqi army. I heard just recently that something 800 Humvees in Mosul alone. But there's no doubt that there is increased levels of uniforms, weapons, all types of military ordnance coming in from other places as well, and more importantly, funding as well. There are certain accusations that that Turkey as well has been assisting the Islamic State, particularly against the Kurds, because there are only reasons.
You see, it's interesting. David Cameron talks about a full spectrum response, but there's not going to be a full spectrum response. There are not going to be many weapons, and there's certainly not going to be any boots on the ground. I mean, is that what you're advocating?
No, I have to say no. I'm not. I don't say that Britain should actually send troops on the ground. That's just not the answer. There are plenty of people, forces there that have the ability to take back and fight the Islamic State, take back their lands, and actually secure the country for the future. But what we do need to do is we need to recognise who those people are, because at the moment the YPG, because of Turkey doesn't want to see. It's a NATO member. It's an aspiring member of the European Union. It doesn't want to see Britain support the YPG. So Britain isn't. But the YPG is a major part of the solution here.
Now, Shaista, Mesa mentioned just now, actually, in fact, it was Johnny Mercer who mentioned just now, the hearts and minds issue here, that we need to prevent people being radicalised, and that seems to be a much more difficult task.
It's very difficult. I mean, I've been trying to understand myself and going onto Twitter and following jihadi accounts to see what rhetoric they're using, how they're trying to brainwash and manipulate people. I've also been going into schools. I was in a school yesterday talking about cohesion and radicalisation to try and find out, you know, why might a young person give up the luxuries and the comforts of the UK, also cut off family ties, knowing that you're not going to see your loved ones ever again, and to go across there. And it's really difficult to understand. And I've got a couple of theories, and obviously you probably need people to come back and confirm those. What I'm concluding is there are young girls, probably between sort of 15 to 20, who don't know about their faith. They might have issues going on at home. They probably feel restricted. And they see all these empowerment images. Obviously, we see the other side, the beheadings and sexual violence, and they're shown images of women carrying guns, women riding horses, women being educated, told that they're going to be honoured. So they think that they're going to be empowered when they get across there.
Right.
Obviously, when they get across there, it's not the case. But then you have another group of women.
Well, hang on a minute, because you've presented enough of a challenge, even with what you've described.
Okay.
And at the end of the day, we're left with a two-pronged approach. One is to deal with hearts and minds here, and the other is what to do about Mesa's forces that he's fought with.
But that's
clearly inadequately armed. No question of us arming the Kurds.
But John, forgive me, but when you say, you know, the Prime Minister's doing nothing about it, I'm afraid you are entirely wrong.
I'm saying we're
because,
not.
No, we have a very, you know, he's asked for a full spectrum approach, and that is precisely what is going on.
Okay.
We've committed.
What is the full spectrum when it comes to the forces he's been fighting with?
So by your own admission, you have seen Western, what we call facilitators out there, okay? Because the KPG,
but a group that is
they
less
are American
well-armed
at the
than
moment,
ISIS.
but there are British trainers out there doing Iraq as well.
Iraq, but not in Syria.
Okay, not in Syria, but we're having that debate at the moment. That came to the House of Commons. The House of Commons delivered a verdict. We are a democracy and we stand by that. You know, it would be, we're fighting against an enemy that clearly has no respect for any boundaries. And so, you know, absolutely it's right that we should be looking at Syria to defeat that.
Well, I'm afraid we must leave it there, but I hope we can talk to you again. But thank you very much indeed for coming in, Mesa. Thank you, Johnny Mercer. And thank you, Shaista, indeed, for coming in from Birmingham. Thank you.